Emily Carter woke before dawn, pulled out of sleep by the muted vibration of her phone on the nightstand. For a moment, she hovered in that hazy space between dreaming and waking, her hand blindly searching until her fingers brushed the glowing screen. Through the blur of early morning exhaustion, she recognized the caller ID, Mom. She pressed the phone to her ear, eyes still half closed. "Hello," she mumbled. Her mother's voice burst through, bright and breathless with joy. "Emily, sweetheart, Cassidy had the baby. A boy. 7 pounds, 14 ounces. Perfectly healthy." Sleep evaporated instantly. Emily pushed herself upright, heart kicking forward with a warm, stunned rush. When? How did it go? "She delivered around 3 this morning. Everything's fine. She's exhausted, but she's glowing. I'm already on my way to Denver General. Will you meet us there?" "Of course," Emily said, already swinging her legs out of bed. She hung up and leaned against the hallway wall for a moment, letting the news settle. Cassidy, her impulsive, free-spirited little sister, was officially a mother, and that meant Emily, the steady one, the organized one. The caretaker, even in childhood, was now an aunt. The thought wrapped around her chest like warmth under a heavy blanket. In the bathroom, she splashed cold water on her face and stared at her reflection. 32 years old, shoulder-length dark hair, gray eyes that always looked a little too thoughtful, a little too cautious. She had always considered her features ordinary, not striking like Cassidy's bright blue eyes and wild curls. But today she didn't care about any of that. Today felt bigger. When she stepped out of the bedroom, Mark Carter was awake, sitting at the edge of the bed, rubbing sleep from his face. "What's going on?" he asked, voice rough from sleep. "Cassidy had the baby," Emily said, unable to stop the smile stretching across her face. "A little boy. I'm going to the hospital." "Congratulations," Mark murmured, yawning. "I'd go with you, but I have an early shift. And they won't let men in during visiting hours anyway. Tell your mom and Cass I said hi." Emily nodded. She wasn't surprised. Mark had always been polite with her family, but kept his distance. He was private, steady, predictable, traits she once found comforting. Lately, though, that distance felt heavier. She dressed quickly. Jeans, a warm sweater, her favorite worn jacket. Before heading straight to the hospital, she stopped at a small children's store just opening for the morning. The scent of new fabric and baby powder hung in the air as she browsed shelves overflowing with tiny onesies, pastel blankets, soft toys, and rattles shaped like stars. "Can I help you with anything?" a cheerful clerk asked. "I need something for a newborn boy," Emily said, still smiling. "First child in the family?" "First nephew," she corrected gently, warmth rising in her chest again. She chose a plush teddy bear with soft, floppy paws, a bundle of cozy receiving blankets, and a rattle shaped like a cloud. She added a small box of chocolate truffles for Cassidy. Her sister had always had an incurable sweet tooth. Outside, the city was only beginning to wake. Early sunlight slid between downtown buildings as she walked toward the bus stop, the gift bag swinging at her side. Her breath puffed in the cold morning air. On the ride across Denver, she rested her forehead against the window, watching the streets blur past. She thought of Cassidy as a toddler, clinging to her hand. As a teenager, testing every limit imaginable. As an adult, calling Emily only when life became too tangled or too heavy. They used to be inseparable. Somewhere along the line, life, jobs, relationships growing up had pulled them into different orbits. Maybe today could stitch some of that back together. Her thoughts drifted to her own quiet life. Her accounting job at a construction firm, reliable and unchanging, her calm, steady marriage to Mark, and the old apartment on Capitol Hill that her grandmother had left her. High ceilings, creaking floors, a home filled with echoes of someone who had loved her fiercely. Emily held the gift bag a little tighter. A new baby, a second chance at closeness. And for the first time in months, she felt something that wasn't routine or numbness. Hope. And as the hospital came into view, Denver General's familiar gray stone catching the first full stretch of sunrise, Emily felt ready. Ready to see Cassidy. Ready to meet her nephew. Ready for whatever came next. Believing this morning might be the beginning of something good. By the time Emily reached Denver General Medical Center, the sun had lifted enough to wash the parking lot in a pale, early morning glow. She crossed the sidewalk with the gift bag tucked close to her side, only to find several other people lingering near the main doors, some with flowers, others clutching bags of newborn clothes. A sign taped beside the entryway confirmed what the cluster of visitors already knew. Visiting hours begin at 9 a.m. Emily checked her phone. It wasn't even 8 yet. A small sigh escaped her as she stepped back from the door. She didn't mind waiting, not really, but the pause left space for old memories to drift in, uninvited yet persistent. She found an empty bench near the walkway and sat down, letting her bag rest at her feet. Denver General loomed above her, its stone facade familiar, almost comforting. She had been here before, for school physicals, for her grandmother's final days. But today felt different. Today she wanted joy. Her thoughts circled back to Cassidy, as they so often did. Growing up, the two sisters had shared everything. The same creaky floors in their grandmother's Capitol Hill apartment, the same mismatched quilts, the same late-night talks under dim lamps when thunderstorms rattled the windows. That apartment had felt like a universe of its own. Warm, messy, full of lavender sachets and knitting baskets, and the ever-present smell of cinnamon tea. Emily had been the cautious one, the rule follower, the girl who finished her homework early and lined her shoes neatly in the hallway. Cassidy wasn't. Cassidy had been wild, dazzling, unpredictable, sprinting down alleys on rollerblades, bringing home stray cats, falling in and out of friendships like seasons changing. Teachers complained, boys adored her, and Emily spent half her childhood stepping between Cassidy and trouble. They grew apart gradually, not with any dramatic event, but with life simply moving them in different directions. Emily went to college, found a stable job, built routines that made sense to her. Cassidy drifted into a string of unstable relationships, each more chaotic than the last. There were late-night phone calls, tear-laden stories, promises of fresh starts that never quite stuck. And then the pregnancy. Cassidy had announced it with her usual blend of bravado and fear, claiming that Ryan Hill, a bartender she'd been seeing for barely 3 months, was going to step up. Emily had tried to be supportive, but even she had seen the tension ripple through their parents' faces. Ryan disappeared less than 2 months later, leaving only an offhand message about needing time. The family fallout had been immediate. Arguments, accusations, and long silences. Emily remembered sitting at her kitchen table one evening, hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea, trying to think of anything that would help. In the end, she had offered something simple, a place to stay. "You can move in with us if you want," she told Cassidy carefully. "It's just until you get through the pregnancy. There's room." Cassidy had hesitated only a second before shaking her head. "I need space, Em. I don't want to intrude on your marriage." Emily hadn't pushed. She had wanted to, but Cassidy's stubbornness had always been a force of nature. Instead, they settled into a familiar pattern. Sporadic updates, uneven conversations, stretches of silence where Emily could only hope her sister was okay. Now, as she sat outside the hospital watching people sip coffee from paper cups and shuffle impatiently in the cold, she felt a small, unexpected smile lift her lips. Despite everything, the distance, the tension, the choices neither of them fully understood, Cassidy had made it through the pregnancy, and Emily was here, not out of obligation, but because she wanted to be, because maybe this was the moment that could start mending what life had slowly unraveled. She looked up at the hospital doors with renewed warmth. A nephew, a new beginning. Cassidy would need support, and Emily was finally ready to give it, not cautiously, not hesitantly, but fully. Today, she thought, might be the day they found their way back to each other. When Emily moved closer to the hospital gate, the flow of visitors had thickened. A few held balloons, others clutched flowers wrapped in cellophane. Near the metal railing, a middle-aged homeless woman sat on a folded blanket, a paper cup placed carefully beside her. Emily noticed her mostly because she wasn't calling out or rattling the cup the way some people did. She simply sat there with a quiet, tired dignity, layered clothes, worn jacket, hair pulled back in a loose gray-streaked braid. A cardboard sign leaned against her bag. Anything helps, God bless. On impulse, Emily reached into her pocket and found some spare change. She dropped the coins into the cup, offering a small, polite smile. But before she could step away, the woman's hand shot up, not grabbing her, not aggressive, just firm enough to stop her. "Wait," the woman said, quietly. Emily froze mid-step, startled. "I'm sorry. Did I do something wrong?" she asked, glancing around. The woman shook her head slowly. Her voice was low and strained, as though every word cost effort. "No, you were kind. That's why I need you to listen." Emily blinked, uneasy. People walked past them without paying attention. No one seemed to notice that the woman was studying her face, intensely, almost searchingly. "You look familiar," the woman murmured, squinting slightly. "I've seen someone who looks just like you." Emily frowned, confused. "I'm sorry? I don't think we've met." The woman wet her lips, nervous. "My name's Martha. Martha Lee." Emily nodded cautiously, unsure what to say. "Emily," she answered softly. Martha leaned in, lowering her voice as though they were sharing something that shouldn't be overheard. "Listen, Emily. I need you to hold on a second. Just don't go in yet." A cold flutter went through Emily's stomach. "Why? Is something wrong inside?" "No," Martha hesitated. "Not inside. Outside. The side exit. Over there." She gestured with her chin toward a narrow service door halfway along the building, a place most visitors would never look at twice. Emily followed the direction of her gaze, then turned back slowly. "I don't understand." Martha swallowed hard. "I sit here most days. I see things people don't notice. And the last few days, I keep seeing a man. Tall, dark hair, fair skin, looks a lot like you. Enough that I thought he might be your brother." There was a strange twist in the pit of Emily's stomach, faint but noticeable. "My husband has dark hair," she said, trying to keep her voice neutral. "But he's at work right now." Martha shook her head immediately. "No, he's been here. More than once this week. And he wasn't alone." The words seemed to hang in the cold morning air, weighty and impossible. Emily stared at her. "That doesn't make sense," she said softly, as much to herself as to the woman. "Are you sure?" "I remember faces." "It's the only thing I've got left sharp," Martha interrupted gently. "I know who I've seen, and whoever he is, he didn't look like he wanted anyone to notice." Emily's pulse quickened. She stepped back instinctively. "Martha, I appreciate your concern, but I think you must have mistaken someone else. I'm not asking you to believe me," Martha said, lifting a hand. "Just look. Look at the side door. Give it a minute. That's all." Her voice was earnest, almost pleading, and something in it, a tremor, a desperation that didn't feel manipulative, made Emily pause despite herself. Visitors continued to gather at the entrance. A nurse passed by, sipping coffee. Engines hummed in the parking lot. Everything looked so normal, so routine, that Martha's warning felt like a sharp crack in an otherwise smooth surface. Emily stood there frozen, her fingers tightening around the handles of the gift bag. She didn't move toward the hospital, but she didn't step away either. Slowly, almost reluctantly, She turned toward the narrow service door Martha had pointed out. "Just watch," Martha whispered. "It won't take long." Suspense coiled tight in Emily's chest, a quiet, gripping tension she couldn't explain. She wasn't sure whether she believed this stranger. She wasn't even sure why she was still standing there. But she looked, and she waited. Emily's breath hung unsteadily in the cold morning air as she stared at the narrow side exit Martha had pointed out. A blank metal door, no windows. No sign. Just a service entrance staff used to wheel equipment or take smoke breaks. Nothing about it seemed important. Until it opened. The hinges creaked sharply, slicing through the ambient noise of the hospital grounds. Emily's heart stuttered. She leaned forward instinctively, eyes narrowing as the door swung outward. A man stepped into view. Tall, dark hair, familiar jacket. Mark, her husband. Emily felt the world tilt. For a split second, she couldn't hear anything. Not the hum of traffic, not the murmur of visitors, not even the wind. Everything collapsed into a ringing silence. Mark Carter wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be at work. He had kissed her goodbye just an hour earlier, keys in hand, promising to call later. He had looked her in the eye, but he was here, and he wasn't alone. Cradled in his arms was a newborn wrapped in a soft pink blanket, a baby who stirred gently against his chest. Mark held the infant carefully, almost tenderly, as though it belonged to him. Before Emily could make sense of the sight, another figure stepped out behind him. Cassidy, her sister. Cassidy looked exhausted, her blonde curls tied loosely, her face pale from labor. But there was something else, too. A glow, a warmth, and the way she leaned into Mark. It was unmistakable. They stood close. Too close, as though sharing a private moment no one else was meant to see. Emily's lungs tightened painfully. Cassidy reached out and traced a small adjustment across the blanket, her fingers brushing Mark's hand with casual familiarity. Mark said something. Emily couldn't hear what, but he smiled. A soft, intimate smile she hadn't seen on his face in months. Cassidy laughed quietly in return. They looked like a couple. A new family. Emily's knees threatened to buckle. She grabbed the cold metal railing beside the walkway just to keep herself upright. The gift bag slipped from her hand, landing silently on the pavement, the teddy bear inside shifting with a soft thud. She couldn't breathe. Mark shifted the baby in his arms and held the door open so Cassidy could step fully into the sunlight. Then, as though rehearsed, he leaned down and kissed the infant gently on the forehead. Cassidy watched him with something terrifyingly close to affection. Emily covered her mouth with both hands. No, 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 no. It couldn't be. It shouldn't be. She must be sick, hallucinating, misreading everything. But the moment sharpened with each passing second. Mark handed the baby to her sister. Cassidy accepted the child with practiced tenderness, adjusting the pink blanket, swaying lightly as she held the tiny body against her chest. Mark brushed a strand of hair from Cassidy's face. Her sister didn't move away. Together, they walked toward the parking lot, toward Mark's car, side by side, talking softly, smiling, moving with the quiet comfort of people who shared secrets, plans, and nights Emily was never part of. It was too much. Emily felt a hot flash of dizziness sweep through her. The corners of her vision blurred. Her chest constricted so tightly she wondered if she might faint right there on the concrete. A steadying hand touched her arm. Martha, the homeless woman, stood beside her, expression somber, eyes filled with an understanding far deeper than a stranger should have. "I'm sorry," Martha whispered. "I thought you deserved to see it before you walked through those doors." Emily's throat closed, unable to form words. Tears gathered, but didn't fall. She was too stunned even to cry. Mark reached his car, opened the back door, and helped Cassidy settle into the seat with the baby. They kept talking, kept smiling. utterly unaware of the devastation unfolding just yards away. Emily couldn't watch anymore. Her body moved before her mind caught up. Quick, shaky steps carrying her away from the hospital entrance, away from the side door, away from the truth she wasn't ready to face. She didn't look back. She didn't speak. She didn't breathe until she'd crossed the street and reached the shadows of a row of parked cars. Only then did the sob rise, silent, raw, torn from someplace deep inside. Sister, husband, baby, all tangled together in a betrayal so complete it hollowed her out from the inside. And Emily Carter fled the hospital grounds with her world shattered in a single, merciless moment. Emily didn't remember crossing the street. She didn't remember finding the bus stop or the cold metal bench, or the people moving around her with coffees and backpacks and early morning energy. Her mind had gone hollow, stripped of sound, stripped of shape. She boarded the first bus that opened its doors, not even registering its route number. Denver blurred, past the window, Colfax Avenue. Old brick storefronts, half-empty parking lots, evergreen trees dusted with early frost. None of it registered. Her reflection in the glass looked ghostly. Her eyes wide and unfocused, mouth slightly parted as if still trying to breathe through the shock. She wasn't sure how long she sat like that, minutes, an hour, watching the city smear into colors. When the bus stopped near her neighborhood in Capitol Hill, her legs moved on instinct alone. She stepped off, nearly stumbling onto the sidewalk. The walk to her apartment felt endless. Every step felt like pushing through water. By the time she reached the front door, her hands were shaking so hard she could barely fit the key into the lock. The moment the deadbolt clicked, she slipped inside and closed the door behind her. Then she collapsed. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the hardwood floor, her back pressed to the door, tears spilling silently in thick, uncontrollable waves. She didn't sob. There wasn't enough air in her lungs for that. She just cried, soundless, shaking, her whole body trembling from the weight of what she had seen. Mark, Cassidy, the baby, her husband and her sister walking together like a family, her sister's newborn in Mark's arms, their smiles, their ease, their intimacy. Emily pulled her knees to her chest and buried her face against them. Minutes passed, maybe longer. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes felt raw, her throat thick and burning. Gradually, painfully, she forced herself to breathe again. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. The quietness made her mind race. Had she really missed everything? Had she been living inside a lie this deep, this obvious? On shaky legs, she pushed herself upright. She needed something. Clarity. Proof. Anything that made this nightmare make sense. She walked through the apartment in slow, trembling steps. The kitchen, the living room, the hallway. She checked drawers, opened cabinets, stared at shelves as if they might reveal secrets she'd overlooked. Nothing. But on the desk beside the small living room window sat Mark's tablet, the one he used for work meetings and grocery orders. He usually kept it locked, face down or tucked away. Today it lay open, face up, screen lit, no password screen. Emily felt a slow, icy dread crawl up her spine. She reached for it with hesitant fingers. The home screen appeared instantly, no barrier, no lock. No protection, as though he had never expected her to look, or as though he had stopped caring if she did. Her throat tightened as she tapped the messaging app. The screen filled with a conversation. Mark Carter, Cassidy Hill. Her sister's name stared back at her like a wound. Emily's hand flew to her mouth as she scrolled. Message after message. Weeks of conversations. Affectionate, familiar, intimate. Photos of them together, Cassidy with her belly showing at different stages, Mark holding her stomach, both smiling. Cassidy curled against his side on a couch Emily didn't recognize. Mark's hand brushing her cheek. Emily's stomach heaved. Then came the messages about the pregnancy, ultrasound photos, discussions of baby names, plans for doctor visits, and then the worst of it, explicit conversations that tore through her like shards of glass. Emily will never question anything. She trusts you. We should register my address under her apartment. It'll make the paperwork easier. Once the baby comes, we'll find a way to get her out. We just need time. She's too quiet to fight back. The apartment will be ours eventually. It's worth the patience. Emily dropped the tablet onto the couch as though it had burned her. The implications hit one by one, each more brutal than the last. Cassidy hadn't just drifted into trouble. Mark hadn't just grown distant. They had planned everything. Together. Planned around her. Planned through her. Planned to take her grandmother's apartment. The one piece of family history Emily had left. Her chest constricted until she had to grip the back of the couch to stay upright. This wasn't an affair that spiraled out of control. It was deliberate, calculated, a betrayal crafted inch by inch while she worked, cooked, paid bills, and tried to hold her quiet marriage together. Her world, her sister, her husband, her home, had been built on lies she never saw coming. And now the truth sat in front of her, undeniable and merciless, for several long minutes. Emily stood in the center of her living room, staring at Mark's tablet as though it were a venomous thing. Her chest rose and fell unevenly. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. But beneath the grief, beneath the disbelief, something colder began to take root, clarity. The kind that arrives only after a blow so devastating it forces the mind to sharpen. She wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve and reached for the tablet again. Her hand still shook, but her movements were steady with purpose now. One by one, she opened every message thread between Mark and Cassidy. She began screenshotting. Every photo, every message, every timestamp. She took backups, saved copies to the cloud, emailed herself folders labeled with dates. She documented everything with the precision of someone who suddenly understood she had been living in a battlefield without armor. It was nearly noon when she finally set the tablet down. Her body felt drained, but her mind was sharp. She needed legal help, not tomorrow, not next week. Now, Emily opened her laptop and searched for Denver family law attorneys. She didn't know who to trust, but the name Victor Hale appeared repeatedly in reviews. Calm, strategic, straightforward, no nonsense. Exactly what she needed. Her voice wavered when she made the call, but she managed to explain the situation to the receptionist. Within minutes, Victor himself came on the line. "Emily," he said calmly, "start from the beginning. Tell me everything you saw." She inhaled shakily, and she did. She told him about the hospital, the baby, Cassidy, Mark, the intimate way they stood together, the tablet, the messages, the plan to push her out of her grandmother's apartment. Victor listened without interrupting, except for the occasional, "I understand," or "Go on." His voice remained steady, grounding her when she felt herself spiraling. When she finished, he exhaled slowly. "Emily, I need you to hear something very clearly," he said. "The apartment you mentioned, when did you inherit it?" "Before I married Mark. 5 years before." "Good." His tone sharpened, becoming more decisive. "Under Colorado law, inherited property that is kept separate remains separate. It is yours, solely yours. It does not matter if you're married. It does not matter what Mark wants. He has no legal claim." Emily closed her eyes, gripping the edge of the desk. Relief didn't come. Not yet, but the words steadied her. Victor continued. "Second, you can file for divorce immediately. You don't need Mark's permission. And given the circumstances, I strongly recommend you file sooner rather than later." Emily swallowed hard. The idea of divorce felt like a shadow she had never expected to face. Yet it didn't frighten her the way it should have. Not after this morning. "What about safety?" she asked quietly. If he comes home angry? Or tries to force his way in? If Mark attempts to enter your apartment without consent, Victor said firmly, call building security first. If he escalates, call Denver PD. You have every legal right to protect your property and your peace. And given what you've told me, I can file a temporary protective order if needed. Emily's fingers tightened. This isn't your fault, Victor added. What they're doing, what they've planned, is calculated. But you have more power here than you think. For the first time since the hospital, Emily felt something flicker inside her, not hope, not strength. Something simpler, the faintest sense of control. When can I meet you? She asked. I have an opening tomorrow morning at 9, he replied. Bring proof of inheritance, titled documents for the apartment, any evidence of the messages and identification. We'll take it from there. I'll be there, she whispered. After ending the call, Emily stood in her quiet living room, the weight of her next steps settling heavily across her shoulders. She went to the file cabinet and pulled out the folder containing her grandmother's property documents, deeds, tax records, letters from the estate attorney. She gathered them all into a new binder. The binder felt heavier than it should have, as if it carried not only paperwork, but the truth she had refused to see. She set it beside the tablet, her fingers brushing the cool cover. Tomorrow would begin the confrontation, the first real step toward reclaiming what was hers and dismantling the plan Mark and Cassidy had built behind her back. Emily inhaled deeply. The devastation remained. But now, for the first time since sunrise, so did resolve. After the call with Victor, Emily didn't let herself hesitate. Momentum was the only thing keeping her upright. If she stopped moving, she feared she would collapse again. She opened her laptop once more and searched for emergency locksmiths in Denver. Within minutes, she found someone with strong reviews. Available immediately, Alan Martinez, 24/7 residential lock services. When Alan arrived, Emily kept her explanation brief. I need every lock changed. Today. She didn't elaborate, and Alan, a man in his late 40s with steady hands and a calm, professional air, didn't pry. As he worked, the rhythmic clicks of metal against metal filled the apartment, a slow, methodical dismantling of her old vulnerability. When he finished, he handed her 2 fresh sets of keys. You're all set, he said gently. No one with an old key is getting in here. Emily nodded and paid him, grateful for his quiet efficiency. But she wasn't done. Next, she contacted a private security service recommended by Victor's office. Within the hour, Kevin Woods, a tall former Army MP with a composed demeanor, arrived at her door. He stood in the hallway, arms folded, posture alert but relaxed. Your attorney briefed us, he said. I'll stay stationed here until your husband leaves. If he escalates, I'll intervene and call building security or Denver PD. You won't handle this alone. Emily felt an unexpected surge of relief at his presence. She had spent years handling things alone, holding her family together, smoothing over tension, ignoring her own needs. Today, she finally allowed help. With the locks changed and Kevin posted outside, there was one last task to finish. She gathered every belonging of Mark's she could find. Clothes, shoes, electronics, chargers, toiletries, books, the stray items he'd scattered through drawers across the apartment. She packed them into 3 luggage bags and 2 cardboard boxes. Her movements mechanical, but precise. Each item she folded away was a small, bitter acknowledgement. This marriage was over. This home was hers, and always had been. He would not step inside again. She lined the bags neatly near the front door, arranging them like an unspoken boundary. By late evening, the sky outside had turned a muted blue, and the city lights shimmered beyond her window. Emily sat on the couch, her binder of documents beside her, waiting for the inevitable. It didn't take long. At 7:42 p.m., keys jingled outside the door. Then a metallic scrape. A second attempt. Then a third, more aggressive. Finally, a loud bang. "Emily, what the hell is going on?" Mark's voice thundered through the hallway. Emily stood slowly, steadying her breath. Kevin shifted his stance outside, readying himself without drawing attention. Mark's voice rose, furious now. "Why isn't my key working? Emily, open this door." She walked to the entrance and opened it just a few inches, only enough to see him, not enough to let him in. Mark's face was flushed with anger and confusion. "Are you out of your mind? Why are the locks changed?" Emily kept her voice level. "Because this is my apartment, legally mine, and because we're done, Mark." He blinked, stunned. "What are you talking about?" "I know everything," she said softly. "The hospital, the baby, Cassidy, the messages, the plan to push me out, all of it." His jaw dropped open, then his expression twisted into rage. "You went through my tablet? That's a violation." "No," she cut in, her voice firm. "What you did was a violation of our marriage, of my trust, of basic decency." Mark stepped forward, but Kevin immediately placed a firm hand on his shoulder, stopping him cold. "You need to stay back, sir," Kevin said calmly. Mark jerked his arm away. "Who the hell are you?" "Security," Kevin replied. "You do not have permission to enter this residence." Emily didn't flinch. She nudged the luggage bags forward with her foot. "These are your things. Take them and go. We'll communicate through my attorney moving forward." "Emily, be reasonable." She shut the door. Firm. Final. The echo vibrated through the apartment. Outside, Mark's muffled shouting escalated briefly, but Kevin's steady, authoritative voice overpowered it. After several tense minutes, the hallway went quiet. Emily locked the new deadbolt, leaned her forehead against the door, and exhaled a trembling breath. She wasn't whole. She wasn't healed. But for the first time all day, she wasn't powerless. The night after the confrontation, Emily expected silence. Instead, her phone lit up repeatedly, vibrating across the kitchen counter long after she had crawled into bed, fully clothed, exhausted. At first, she ignored it. But when the buzzing didn't stop, she finally checked the screen. 15 new messages, Cassidy. Emily opened the thread, reluctantly. "Emily, please." "You don't understand. It wasn't like that. He lied to me too. I just had a baby. You can't abandon me. I need a place to stay. Please. Please. You're my sister." The desperation sharpened with every message, shifting into emotional manipulation, the familiar tone their parents had always excused. Emily read them all once. Then she blocked the number. Minutes later, her phone rang again, this time her mother's contact flashing across the screen. She let it go to voicemail. A moment later, another call, then another. Emily finally answered, her voice steady only because she was too drained to feel anything. Her mother didn't even say hello. "Emily and Carter, how dare you? Cassidy told me everything. You threw your own sister out on the street? She just had a baby." Emily stared at the wall, emotionless. Her mother continued, voice rising sharply. "You always thought you were better than her. Well, congratulations. You broke her. She says she has nowhere to go. How could you be so heartless?" Emily said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. She quietly ended the call. When her phone rang again, she turned it face down and let the silence reclaim the apartment. The next 2 weeks crawled by in a strange mixture of numbness and determination. Emily worked, ate when she remembered, slept fitfully. She met with Victor twice, reviewing documents, preparing statements, organizing every screenshot into labeled folders. Mark did not return to the building. Thanks to Kevin, to the new locks, and perhaps to the sudden legal reality he now understood. Finally, the morning of the court hearing arrived. Denver County Court buzzed with attorneys, couples, clerks, and people clutching paperwork with trembling hands. Emily stood beside Victor, her binder in hand, her composure carefully constructed even as her stomach twisted. Mark arrived late, hair unkempt, suit slightly wrinkled, eyes flashing with indignation. He didn't look at Emily, didn't acknowledge her presence. Instead, he spoke directly to his attorney in an agitated whisper, pointing toward her binder as though it personally offended him. When their case was called, they entered the small courtroom. The judge, a middle-aged woman with stern eyes and a measured voice, listened as Mark's attorney launched into his argument. Your Honor, my client has contributed significantly to the marital residence. He invested in renovations, household improvements, and general upkeep. He is seeking fair compensation for his financial contributions. Emily felt the familiar burn of betrayal rise in her throat. Victor stood smoothly. Your Honor, all renovation expenses were paid by my client solely and verifiably. We have receipts, timestamps, bank statements, and contractor records. Mr. Carter did not contribute $1 toward the property, which is and has always been inherited separate property under Colorado law. He handed the judge a neatly organized packet. Mark's attorney shifted uncomfortably. The judge flipped through the documents, pausing at bank statements showing Emily's solo transfers and payments. After several long moments, she looked up. Mr. Carter, do you dispute these records? Mark swallowed. I handled things verbally. That's not how courts operate, the judge said firmly. Then she turned to Emily. Mrs. Carter, your filings are complete and supported by evidence. The apartment remains your separate property. There is no basis for compensation. Mark's face drained of color. The judge continued, her tone decisive. Divorce granted. Mr. Carter has no entitlement to the property. He must vacate any claim and make no attempt to enter the residence. This ruling is effective immediately. The gavel struck once, sharp, final. Outside the courtroom, Cassidy was waiting in the hallway, pale, unsteady, holding her newborn son. When she saw Mark emerge empty-handed, her expression shattered. What do you mean you don't have the apartment? Mark, what am I supposed to do? We talked about this. You said. Mark snapped at her under his breath, frustration and panic overtaking him as he realized the full weight of the judge's ruling. Cassidy broke down completely, trembling, crying, clutching the baby as though everything in her world had just crumbled. And for the first time in a long time, Emily felt nothing at all. Not anger, not guilt, not even satisfaction. Just distance, a clean, quiet distance she had earned. 30 days passed with a quiet, gradual steadiness Emily hadn't felt in years. The sharp edges of betrayal no longer cut as deeply. The apartment felt different now, lighter, safer, more hers than ever before. She found herself rearranging shelves, repainting a wall, letting sunlight in through curtains she used to keep drawn. Every small change felt like reclaiming a piece of her life. Victor finalized the last of the paperwork. Mark stayed silent. Cassidy never contacted her again. Blocked numbers, blocked emails, blocked noise. Emily started cooking again, found a new therapist, and returned to morning walks through Capitol Hill, letting Denver's winter air clear the remaining heaviness inside her. One Saturday morning, she decided to stop by a cafe a few blocks from the hospital. She hadn't been back in that area since the day everything cracked open. But today, she felt ready, grounded enough to walk past the memories rather than drown in them. She carried her coffee toward the outdoor seating, scanning for an empty table. Then she froze. Near the sidewalk, in the exact spot where she had first seen her, sat Martha Lee. The same worn jacket, the same folded blanket, the same quiet, weathered dignity. Her paper cup rested at her side, though she wasn't calling out or asking anyone for help. For a long moment, Emily simply watched her, a strange mixture of gratitude and disbelief rising in her chest. Then she took a breath and approached. "Martha," she said softly. The woman looked up, squinting slightly before recognition warmed her tired eyes. "Well, look at you," she murmured. "You're standing taller." Emily smiled faintly. "I've been trying." Martha nodded as though she understood more than Emily could ever explain. Emily lowered herself to a crouch so their eyes were level. "I came because I never said thank you," Emily said gently. "That day, you didn't have to say anything. You didn't owe me anything. But you still warned me." Martha's expression shifted, part sorrow, part memory. "I saw them before you did," she admitted. "More than once. Coming out that side door. Laughing. Whispering. Acting like everything in the world belonged to them." Emily's breath caught, but she stayed silent, letting Martha continue. "I didn't know you," Martha said, voice low, "but I recognized the look on your face when you walked past me. Hope. Genuine hope." She swallowed, and I remembered myself. A long time ago. Emily's heart tightened. Martha stared at the sidewalk, her tone softening with old pain. "My husband ran off with my sister, took our savings, took our home, left me with nothing but shame I didn't deserve." Her voice cracked slightly. "I couldn't watch another woman walk blindly into a moment like that. Not if I could stop it." Emily felt tears prick her eyes, not from hurt, but from an overwhelming sense of connection. "You saved me from years of lies," she whispered. "You saved me from myself." She reached into her coat pocket and placed a folded bill into Martha's cup. More than spare change this time. Something meaningful. Martha's eyes widened, and she pushed the cup back gently. "No, I wasn't asking for that." "I know," Emily said. "That's why I want you to take it." A long pause. Then Martha's shoulders softened, and she nodded. "Thank you," she murmured. Emily squeezed her hand, warm, firm, grateful. When she finally stood and stepped away, the air felt different. Clearer, lighter. She didn't look back. For the first time in months, she didn't need to. When Emily returned to her Capitol Hill apartment that afternoon, the sun had shifted low enough to cast warm amber light across the hardwood floors. The space felt unusually still, not empty, not lonely, just quiet. A kind of quiet she couldn't remember feeling when Mark lived there. Back then, the silence had been tense, heavy, filled with words neither of them spoke and truths she never examined too closely. Now the quiet was peaceful. She set her keys on the entry table and let out a long breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The apartment, once tinged with the scent of betrayal, now carried something softer, the faint smell of fresh paint, the lemon soap she had used to clean the counters, the lingering hint of coffee from her morning routine. She walked slowly through each room, touching the edges of books, smoothing a hand across the back of the sofa, adjusting a plant near the window. Everything felt lighter, more honest, as though her home had been waiting patiently for her to return to it fully. That night, she curled into bed without the usual tension layered beneath her skin. No buzzing thoughts about where Mark was or what he wasn't saying. No heavy dread about another strained conversation. No fear that something unnamed was slipping further out of reach. Just quiet, just breath, just her. She fell asleep quickly, deeply, for the first time in years. When she woke the next morning, light filtered through her curtains in soft, muted streaks. She didn't feel the familiar heaviness in her chest. Instead, there was a calm clarity, like the afterglow of a storm finally passing. She made tea and sat by the window with a blanket draped over her legs. Outside, Denver moved along as always, buses humming, cyclists passing, a dog tugging its owner down the street. But Emily felt a small, steady shift inside her. She reflected on everything that had unfolded. The early morning call about Cassidy's baby, the hospital, the side door, the truth that struck so hard she collapsed under it. The screenshots, the lawyer, the changed locks, the court. Mark's anger. Cassidy's collapse. And Martha, a stranger who appeared in her life only long enough to pull her away from the edge of ruin. It all felt surreal, fragile in memory, like something that could dissolve if she blinked too hard. Yet it was her life, her story, one she had survived piece by piece. Emily wrapped her hands around the warm mug and let her eyes close for a moment. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel victorious. But she felt something far better, grounded, steady, free. Her world had broken open in the harshest, most unexpected way, revealing the truth she needed, even if she never wanted it. And within that truth, she found a path back to herself. When she opened her eyes again, the day felt new. Not brighter, not louder, simply new. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.